Hi, listeners. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In today's episode, I had a great conversation with the American Lawyer's editor-in-chief. We discussed numerous topics, including media trends, her values as a reporter, rules of engagement with reporters, what the new AmLaw 100 numbers reveal, and of course, predictions for the legal industry, along with much more. Just a reminder, the PDF transcript of this audio is available for download. Go to liongroup.recruiting.com/podcast. As many of you know, we interview corporate defense law firm leaders, partners, general counsels, and legal consultants. You are listening to episode 22 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States. Enjoy a front row seat with law firm leaders, their partners, and legal consultants as we discuss life and leadership.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Gina Passarella, the editor-in-chief of the American Lawyer. She has covered the business of law for her entire career. First as a reporter and a special projects editor with the Legal Intelligencer in Pennsylvania, then as senior editor for Business of Law in ALM's Global Newsroom. She took over as editor-in-chief of the American Lawyer in January 2017. Gina received her journalism degree from the American University during 2005. Welcome, Gina, to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Gina, I can't help but just jump into your business and your industry, your world. So knowing that you graduated in 2005 and have been in journalism since, I want to just kind of come out of the gate asking, what has changed in the media business, kind of overall in the industry? And then I want to go to the legal side. But overall, I'm curious.
Sure. No, that's a great question. And in some respects, a lot has changed. And in other respects, not much at all. I mean, it's always going to be the case that really interesting news that has insights and strong human intelligence is what's going to resonate with readers. It's probably the biggest change is how we deliver it, how quickly we deliver it, the different places where we can provide that data in articles versus purely a print publication when I started, for the most part, with an online component that was, okay at best, and it's really improved since then. So I would say the changes have really been about how we deliver the content, both on our website and in our newsletters and on social media.
Do you find with the emergence of the internet, which has really kind of been full tilt when you became a journalist, do you find that you sleep less because people get news sooner?
I sleep okay. I won't complain too much about the hours, but certainly, I mean, I think for most journalists that makes it exciting. We're competitive, not with each other, but with getting the news out there. We want to own our beats, and so having the opportunity to break news as soon as we can is somewhat exciting. And has it tweaked the hours a little bit? For sure. Has it shortened the news cycle? For sure. But it's made it a lot more fun too, I think.
So let me apply the same question. Everything you've been in has been mostly like the legal industry focused. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Right. So how has the business of law media coverage changed, say, over the 10, 12 years you've been in it?
And nobody kind of graduates from journalism school and thinks, I want to be a business of law reporter. I don't even know that I knew what that was when I was in school. But, I had a fabulous editor who took a chance on me for a first job and kind of a sink or swim opportunity to cover the large law firms in Pennsylvania, and realized that I loved it. And I think I came into this at a fascinating time where had a couple of years of covering firms in the heyday of just go rate increases and growth across the board. Yeah. And then 2007, 8, 9 hit, and it was just, a very difficult time for firms, certainly, but a fascinating time to be covering the industry and watching it evolve, frankly struggle, but also some really creative endeavors that came out of that time. And ever since, the industry has just been in a constant state of evolution, and it's been a fascinating time to cover it.
Yeah, you're right. So starting in 2005, I mean, the rates are exploding. The reporting of even stats and data about the firms are exploding, and the intrigue with public knowledge, more or less, about the economics of firms. Have you seen a change in consumption or interest because of this new information hitting the market on the business of law?
There's always going to be a knock about whether or not law firms should be providing the level of financial detail that they provide about their businesses. But I mean, our stats show that those pieces certainly do get read, and I think they've become a big element of the business of law in terms of lateral recruiting and how firms are strategizing. We certainly don't encourage any firm to, do their strategic plan based on what their PPP is going to be and ranking is going to be in the American Lawyer next year. I don't think that's smart at all. But the numbers do provide a level of transparency in an industry that is a major player in a lot of the communities that we cover. These are massive employers, and the health of these organizations are hugely important to a lot of people. And they also are involved in every industry in the world and have, some of the most complex issues facing the country and beyond within their walls. So to know how they're doing and how they're operating and growing and where they're looking to kind of invest their capital and their resources is, I think, of great interest. And that's not necessarily a new thing. I think lately the focus has been on, okay, what's the evolution of this business model? What's the next step? Can the old way survive? How are firms innovating? That has certainly become a big part of our reporting.
Mm-hmm. And so in talking earlier, and we talk about data and, ALM, American Lawyer, the ALM intelligence arm, you had mentioned that you've kind of become a data geek. I have to say I'm a geek too, and in my own right of the legal industry. So how does that play out in your role at the American Lawyer?
So it's such a great resource to have. I mean, the American Lawyer on the purely editorial side has been collecting data on law firm finances, hiring, diversity, gender issues, for 30 years. And we have all that data and have had it sitting kind of either in pages of old editions and bound copies on a shelf or in various places on the web that weren't really easy to access. And what our intelligence team has done, particularly with the creation recently of Legal Compass, is to put all of that data in the one place, make it sortable, searchable, comparing firms against their peers, looking at 5-10-year trend lines, whatever your heart's desire in terms of how you cut and slice the data. And the reporters are using that just as much as our readers are using it. And it's become a huge help in doing some quick analysis on financial trends to back up the reporting. I think you can't replace the importance of human intelligence and talking to people and seeing what's happening on the ground. Data doesn't tell the full story, but data certainly does back up a lot of the stories that we're writing about, or frankly debunk theories that we had. And for lawyers who, are often beholden to facts, it can be pretty powerful information to go along with an article. So I think you will continue to see and have seen an increasing use of data to go along with our reporting, whether it be from our reporters or contributors in our ALM Intelligence Fellow program who are digging into that data.
Let me jump to kind of your role inside of ALM as the editor-in-chief of the American Lawyer. What would you say are your leadership values that you bring to this division for the folks bringing content to you and you distributing that content? What would you say some of your values are?
Sure. So, for me, and I tell this to every law firm partner I meet with, this business, like so much of life, is built on relationships and trust. And our reporters and editors and myself, we have to gain the trust of the public through accurate, fair reporting, through really having our finger on the pulse and knowing what's going on and telling them the trends that they need to care about and that maybe they didn't know about, but also giving them the insight. So for me, I think first and foremost, it's really about building that trust with our community, not to say that we're going to be best friends with everyone or that we're going to write only what they want to hear or read, but that we are looking at things in a fair and smart way and are giving the market really the most important information they need. They're busy people. We need to bring that to them. And honestly, from an internal perspective, I think it's from a leadership point of view, it's really about not being competitive with one another, but as I mentioned before, but being competitive externally and just wanting to own our beats and really just kind of becoming a geek about your beat and loving it, and to the point where you are more knowledgeable than anybody else on this, and you're going to be the go-to resource for our team to bring this content to our readers. So I think, showing that you have a love for the content and an understanding of the content and respect the audience and the issues that they're facing and can discuss them in an impactful and intelligent way, I think really resonates with our readers.
I have to agree. I think it does too. And I know you guys do a fantastic job on reporting. Let me kind of just pivot to this concept of content and distribution. I want to ask, what's on the table for the American Lawyer?
Great question. So we typically, we have our daily news alerts that we put out twice a day, and then there's always going to be the coverage of the daily breaking news. And in that mix will be a little bit more enterprise reporting, where we're not just telling you the pure breaking news, but okay, this is a trend that we're noticing, kind of a quick hit enterprise piece on this is what's been happening this week and this is what it means. And then we have our magazine content, which obviously ultimately ends up online. And that often are some longer form pieces that really dive into broader issues. And I and other editors spend a lot of our time meeting with law firm leaders, meeting with alternative legal service providers, general counsel, anybody in the legal industry, to have off-the-record conversations just to really get a sense of what's happening in the market. And I view that as the most important part of my job, because I bring that information back to our reporters and our editors, and through that we can have the most relevant stories of things that are impacting our readers today that they're grappling with, and we can be diving into those issues and frankly serving as business intelligence for our readers by talking to the rest of the market about how they're handling it. So identifying opportunities, challenges in the market, how firms need to address them, how, in terms of some of my initiatives, we don't have every edition planned out for the rest of the year, though there are several, and a lot of them are themed, whether it be our pro bono issue or diversity and the like. But what you will see, even if the stories aren't totally formulated yet, are a big focus on, like I mentioned, I want you to pick up the American Lawyer and say, I didn't know that, or that's the exact issue I'm grappling with. Let me read how other people are dealing with this. And I want it to be forward-looking, identifying trends that are just starting to happen or are coming down the pike. And a lot of that is going to go back to, as I mentioned before, innovation in the law firm, in the legal services delivery model, as well as I really want to see more of the client voice in the publication and how are law firms and clients interacting, what are clients expecting of firms, that kind of topic area I think you'll see a lot of.
Yeah, it's exciting, and I so appreciate including the client voice. Obviously, I know you do that in corporate counsel as a publication.
Absolutely.
And there is so much change going on both sides of that relationship. Let's just talk about content as it relates to technology. Tell me about distribution. What are you guys exploring, knowing that obviously there's traditional print, you have your website, assets. What other methods or things that is on the table that you're exploring, either for the American Lawyer or other publications within ALM?
Sure. So, I think we're not doing anything that is so far out of the box that at least I'm aware of, though I know there are other people in the organization thinking about these things all the time. You're going to continue to see the print publication of American Lawyer on your desk each month. We will continue to put out our newsletters, both in the morning and the afternoon, and our breaking news alerts when appropriate. And that drives a lot of our reader interest, looking at the various offerings for the day.
So tell me about, I think you mentioned you guys started Legal Speak. Is that a podcast, I believe?
Exactly, yeah. So I was going to mention a couple other forms of content that we're offering, and Legal Speak is one. It's a weekly podcast that ALM provides, and it could be reporters or editors across any of our publications on a variety of topics that are relevant to that weeks or months news. And so that's done extremely well for us, and it's a new way to engage with our audience and put out content, and it's done really well. We're looking at video too. We're not quite as far along in that regard as the podcast, but that's something that we're definitely exploring. We've also started briefings, which are weekly, typically newsletters that are very specific to a niche, maybe a practice or a topic, something that maybe an an individual publication of ours doesn't fully focus on, but that it crosses over themes that are important to our audience. So whether it be the law firm Disrupted briefing that Roy Strom does, or Skilled in the Art and IP briefing that Scott Graham does. So they're specific kind of targeted newsletters that an attorney in that practice area or a managing partner who's dealing with issues of managing a firm might look to. And then one thing, to go back to just kind of an old-fashioned way that I would love to, maybe it's not delivering content, but bring our audiences together, I welcome the opportunity to do just community building in the sense of roundtable discussions, bringing in GCs and law firm leaders into a room to talk about issues. So anything that we can do to bring our community together, I think is welcome and on the table for us.
I have to agree with you. I think there would be real demand to hear from law firm leaders and clients do the roundtable. I think I have to agree with you. I think that sometimes classic or old is still very relevant and missed.
Exactly.
And I think that would be great to hear. Knowing that you're a reporter, that you're trained in journalism, would you educate my audience on the rules for engagement with reporters, what to do, what not to do, how folks in the legal industry were to interact with your staff?
Sure. And it's pretty simple. And it's the same thing that we tell our reporters that I would tell our prospective people that we quote. And that's that, it's always good to have a relationship built before that first time that anybody's getting on a call to talk about a news subject. So off the record meetings, we welcome them just to get to know you, learn about what you're writing about. We learn about what you're practicing, what have you. That's not always going to be the case, but those are always welcome. And then it's trying to figure out which reporters are covering which beat or which brands within our chain are focused on what topics. And if ever anybody has questions, because that can be a tough matrix to navigate, you can always feel free to reach out to me or any one of us will direct you the right way. But it's knowing what the reporters care about and pitching them stories, one that haven't already run in another publication, preferably, and being upfront. If you're going to pitch something, make sure that the principals are available to talk about it that day. That's something that happens sometimes where they're all of a sudden not available. But really, it's just setting the ground rules in advance. If you're on the phone and you want it to be off the record, state that in the beginning. Both parties need to agree to it from the start. You can go off the record for portions or not, and try to be as forthcoming as you can. Try to put things into perspective beyond just your own experience. How might this fit into a trend? What other organizations might be doing similar things? That's always helpful. Mm-hmm. But really, it's just about, gaining a comfort level between the reporter and the source, and good information kind of flows from there, I think. Yeah,
that's excellent. I appreciate you sharing that. Mm-hmm. With your role at ALM, and specifically your editor-in-chief of American Lawyer, what surprised you about being in this role so far?
Good question. So I would say it's surprising to me. Like I said, I do a lot of meetings with law firm leadership around the country and firms of different sizes. There are certainly differences among every firm. You hear something different, but it surprises me how many firms, when they kind of talk about their strategy, are saying the same exact thing and wanting to be the same exact firm. And that a lot of it makes sense. A lot of it is very common business goals that anybody should have. But when you think about a market that isn't necessarily growing in demand, how much room there is for firms of a certain type to go after the same type of work it's very interesting to hear. But aside from that more recent development, I'd say I think just the one thing that maybe has surprised me all along in my entire career, and maybe this is unfair prejudgment on my part before I started, but just how open firms and lawyers are about what they're doing, and just they're genuinely trying to figure things out. It's not always easy. They don't have easy jobs, but they certainly take the time to educate our reporters on it. And we wouldn't be as good as we are at what we do if our sources didn't take the time to talk to us about what they're seeing and help us understand what is quite complicated industry.
Yeah, very complicated. So with that kind of same vein of thinking, knowing that you've talked to lots of law firm leaders and you're hearing some rhymes to what they're saying, some consistencies. I know that you just had the unveiling of the AmLaw 100 numbers. Can you kind of distill some of that, of what you've learned and what you're reporting on, what you've learned over the past year with the AmLaw 100 coming out?
Sure. So there was a little bit of a surprise in the AmLaw 100 numbers, and I talked about this when it came out, that for a while, I mean, there's so many different headwinds facing the industry that we've been all reporting on and talking about, whether it be clients taking more work in-house, alternative legal services providers taking a bite out of the demand, or the Big Four and what they're going to do, all these various things that are making it difficult for firms to gain market share, and yet they came out at the end of 2017 with some of the strongest growth in their core financial metrics that they've had since the Great Recession. And this is, we're talking about the AmLaw 100, so it's the 100 largest law firms in the country based on gross revenue. It's also probably, theoretically, some of the best managed firms, the firms that are managed most like a business, that are getting the highest end work. And so it shouldn't be a total surprise, and I don't know that will be consistent across firms lower down the list. In fact, as the AmLaw 200 release approaches, I know it won't be. But, there was some really good highlights out of the list this year. And I think firms were able to capitalize on a strong economy. They were able to increase rates a bit. They're frankly perhaps better managed and have been addressing some of those headwinds that they're facing through cutting some of the equity partnership that was over capacity, or doing various things to better run their business as a business. So it was a really good year, and it seems to be continuing into 2018. We will see whether that's ultimately the case, but as of right now, things are looking good.
Gina, I'd like to ask specific law firm leaders and general counsel and pretty much everyone on the podcast. I really enjoy asking this question, which is, what predictions do you have for the legal industry since we're entering into such a changing economy for firms?
Good question. Crystal ball gazing is a dangerous business, but I'll take a shot. While I just talked about how for the AmLaw 100 it was a really good year, one thing that I think we're going to see across the market is segmentation by peer group, and how sustainable it is to say, do we need 10 international business firms, 10 global firms, 10 Wall Street elite firms? Does the market have room for that many of a certain firm type? And I think we're going to see some shakeout there over the next few years, as within those individual tiers, there are winners and losers.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
What does losers look like?
It could be closure. It could be a merger. It could just be not as successful. But it could go as far as some of those firms closing up.
Yeah. Yeah. So continued shakeout. You did bring up alternative kind of competitors to the law firm industry, including the clients themselves. What do you see happening in that direction? You mentioned the Big Four. I'd love to get your Nostradamus prediction.
Sure. So the Big Four, it's funny, you talk to law firm leaders, particularly in the U.S., and they don't see the Big Four as a major threat, particularly at the larger firms, because they don't think the Big Four are doing the type of high-level work that the larger firms want to be doing. I think there's definitely some truth to that. There's also regulatory hurdles for the Big Four in the U.S., so those that aren't super global don't have to worry about it perhaps as much. But I wouldn't discount them. I think they could be a slightly bigger threat than some firms are giving them credit for.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'll just chip this in. I had a conversation with a very large, I think it was a Global 100, kind of a Fortune 100 company general counsel, who is staring down at their outside counsel, realizing that they're moving more and more work to a Big Four firm for just a consolidation of services that they offer that even law firms don't offer. And this person sees that happening. Yeah, it's something it's what I hear. Yeah. It's pretty wild.
And I think law firms need to pay attention to those kind of things. And a lot of the deals that we're seeing between alternative legal services providers partnering with GCs to take some of the GC work in-house, or some of the work that would have gone to a law firm going there. So this is happening. Maybe some of the firms are okay with shedding that level of work. And but I question whether or not they might need to change their headcount and structure to accommodate that if they're going to be okay with it.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to bring up a subject that seems to be on the front, headline pages and has been, and you guys have been reporting on it for the past couple of years, but just a lot of these gender biased lawsuits with firms. I know a lot of them are being settled with undisclosed amounts, and a named firm right now is being faced with that. Where do you see this heading?
Really good question. It's a very interesting issue. And frankly, I've been, probably more because of the journalist side of me and my intrigue with this, but I've been somewhat frustrated that all of these suits, frankly, have settled. One recently in the Chadbourne case, there was a little bit of information about what that settlement entailed, but there are so many unresolved legal issues down to, whether an equity partner can be considered an employee and bring these charges, because really law firms are managed by a centralized management, and an equity partner is just an employee with partner name only. So all of these issues that are surrounding it would be great to see them litigated and resolved. That's, my journalist hat coming on. But I think we're going to continue to see more and more of these cases. There are plaintiff firms that are aggressively pushing them. There are female lawyers who have very valid claims that they're looking to bring, and I think that's going to happen more and more. We had an article recently about whether just the broader Me Too movement will make all of these issues come to the fore even more, because it's just a topic of conversation that isn't quite as taboo as it once was.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me bring up another subject, and it's something I continue to bring up to different folks I interview, but one of the elephants in the room that continues to kind of creep out in kind of global trends among law firms, which is private ownership of law firms. Do you see the U.S. Bar Association's caving eventually?
We talk about that a lot, and I think there's inevitably going to have to be a lot of pressure put on that model. But oddly enough, I think it's going to be the law firms themselves that, perhaps not oddly enough, that really rally to try to limit that, because I think they have an interest in protecting the status quo.
Right. Exactly. There is that interest. It's interesting because you have some firms that are very willing to be progressive and do things different. And then we have these models that are permittable in U.S. law to allow them to be non-attorney owners, like an Axiom or these alternative business models that are emerging. You wonder how much of those will catch momentum and cause pressure on the decision makers.
Right. You have to think it just seems like such a natural progression. But lobbying can be a powerful thing. So I won't crystal ball gaze on that one.
Yeah. When I began my career as a legal recruiter, I was amazed at an article that the American Lawyer came out with. It was November, and I think it was 2010 maybe. And the big scenario was, what if law firms went public? What if law firms took private capital? And it was an amazing article because it literally walked you through the valuation analysis and scenario of the partners cashing out and then becoming owners themselves or just receiving payment, and just the dynamics that it would wrap around a law firm going public or a law firm taking private financing. And there's so much dry powder right now. I'm surprised that there's not more push from private equity or things like that. So.
Right. And as the litigation funding industry grows, that could have an impact as well. I agree with you.
Yeah. Any other news trending that is really kind of catching your eye or your ear per se as a journalist?
I think it really goes back to a fundamental principle of law firms, which is the partnership model. And that theme threads through everything we've been discussing, which is how much can that traditional partnership model give? How much will it allow firms to experiment with new models? Or frankly, maybe some firms are using it as a shield to avoid having to make these decisions. Yeah. But I think, that model is being tested right now. And it's, as firms look at how they're going to innovate and what clients are demanding of them, I think we're going to continue to see attempts at change, but also some of that innovation really being held back until firms can kind of say, you know what, we're not your typical partnership like we used to be.
Yeah. So transitioning to kind of more personal questions, which I like to ask. Gina, what are you reading these days?
So with a 4.5-year-old at home, I am reading a lot of Dr. Seuss. If you asked me that about 4 years ago, I would have told you, I'm into nonfiction, biographies, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's been a lot of. We just read our first chapter book, Charlotte's Web. So
That's exciting.
That was my last book.
It's always fun to revisit those books.
It is. It was quite enjoyable, actually.
So with you being a journalist and being trained to that as your profession, do you write personally yourself?
I toyed around with blogs and the like. I'm not super into creative writing. I do, again, going back to being a mom, the most I've been writing is in a diary for my daughter once a day. I put a little line in about what happened that day or what's happening with her development, so that I can give that to her a few years from now. But that's the extent of my external writing.
Yeah, no, that's really sweet. With you and the family, do you guys have plans this summer?
We are house hunting, so that is all-consuming.
I am sorry.
So nothing super exciting. And we're also, come September, the family will grow by one. So I'm expecting a baby in September.
Yes,
so,
congratulations.
So those are our big plans. Thank you.
Yeah, those are two big plans. Those are huge.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, we like to do everything transitional all at once, get it done.
Yeah. Are you finding the house hunt fun or grueling with the prices these days?
A little bit of both. We're kind of funny. Our hobby, my husband and I, is antiquing, and we love all things old, including houses. So we're looking at very historic homes, and it is a lot of fun. But with that comes historic home issues.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I imagine. I imagine. And now, if I understand correctly, you're in South New Jersey?
Correct. Yes,
okay.
I'm in South Jersey near Philly.
Are you guys jumping the state line into historic homes into Philadelphia or staying down there?
That's up for debate. I think we're going to probably end up staying in Jersey, though.
Okay. So, Gina, if you weren't in journalism, what would you be doing today?
Oh, that's such a great question. So maybe it's not that far afield, but detective work of any kind, I just find fascinating.
Really?
I love the police work and detective work. Those are the types of books I often read. They're types of shows I often watch. So I'd say I'd probably be somewhere in that field. Fascinating.
So are you like a CSI fan or a Castle fan?
I was for a long time Law and Order SVU, but you can't watch that with the little one running around.
Right.
Again, that has changed too. But yes.
So here's a question from a reader going to a reader is, what's your favorite news network or newspaper? And I'm going to list a couple: New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. Any others you feel free to throw out?
Sure. So that's a really tough question, and perhaps this is the most millennial thing about me, but I really do look. I mean, I read the ones that you mentioned, and I like them very much. And of course, there are local papers in our community that I look to. But Twitter, it's
really,
that's where I have a feed of. I mean, I'll click on the articles when they're interesting, but I have a feed of a number of different publications that I try to look across. I think it's dangerous business to just read one or two.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's fascinating you say Twitter too. I'm a huge Twitter fan myself. I'm amazed at the content I can pull. Are you a loyalist to say like the New Yorker or the Atlantic or any of those other kind of more journalistic publications?
Not particularly. No, I don't have, any fan favorites. If I'm a loyalist at all to other magazines or anything like that, it would be something more along the lines of like National Geographic or something. It's those kind of things that I'm into. So yeah.
That's excellent. Okay. So last question, and this is just a kind of a different direction, but what is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for you, Gina?
Oh, goodness. That is a great question and so hard because truly, I mean, just with this job, with being a mom, with life in general, I mean, it takes a village, right? And it's a constant stream of being very fortunate to have a great support network around me, and couldn't do any of it that I do without the amazing colleagues I work with and the amazing family that I have. I think it's several instances, if I look professionally, of people giving me a shot. letting me try to prove myself and giving me opportunities to have good experiences in my life. I don't know. It's not a great specific answer, but I'd have to go with that.
Yeah. Thank you, Gina. Gina, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you have questions or would like to recommend someone to be on the podcast, please email them to podcast@findthelions.com. That's FINDTHELIONS.com. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes. Also, please share our podcast with others via email or social media. To share our podcast, listen to more shows, or to read the transcription of this audio, go to liongrouprerecruiting.com/podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.